Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are in our 34th year, I talk to writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished in the past, what they're planning for the future. It's a slightly wider net, though. We have had on other artists, such as musicians, sculptors, painters, other brands of artists. So if you have an idea for a writer or even another kind of artist who's a good pick for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the show. We'd love to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming out of 1623 studios is a result of cable access television. You stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. Tonight, I'm happy to say we do have a writer, a woman who's produced a wonderful book called Journey to America. It is by Antonietta Calabrese. This is the book, and I'm going to introduce Antonietta right now. Welcome to the Writer's Block.
Hi, John. How are you?
I love this book.
Thank you for having me.
I want to, first question.
Yes.
Where can our audience buy copies of this book?
So I have it at the bookstore on Main Street. And then it's also at the library, which they told me it's in the historical section, that they literally sit there and read it. It's not a long book. It's probably an hour and a half most. You sit there, relax, and finish it off. It's really fast. And I'm going to probably put it on Amazon soon. But because I'm transferring in Italian, all of it, I'm about to print it in Italian. So maybe I'll put it on Amazon.
It's a wonderful book.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it very much. I was moved by it. You've had a long, exciting up and down journey from rural Sicily to Gloucester, Massachusetts. And the book is about that, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about it.
Sure.
Tell me where you were born.
So I was born in Partana, Sicily, Italy, which is about it's not on the water, but it's about 15 minutes from the water, where Sicily is totally surrounded by water anyway. Yeah. So, but it's a small town with probably, I would say, about 20,000 people. It's not too small, but it's big enough. And so what happened was I was there almost all my life, up to about 15 years old. And which I was doing like from 10 years old on. I learned how to sew. I learned how to go in the fields and pick grapes and olives with my family. I learned to take care of my sisters because my parents were in the fields at all times. I learned how to cook. I learned how to bake bread. Within like 11 years old, I was doing all that.
One thing, in addition, I know you went to the well to get water.
Yeah.
And you have a really fun fact in here that the well had on purpose eels.
Eels in there.
How did they get there, and
so
what were they there for?
My father, yes, well, so because we didn't have any running water, we had a well literally outside the door. And my father, and that's rainwater, so you get into the well. So my dad will throw about 4 or 5 eels in there, because I understand from them that they eat all the grubs and all the mites and things that contaminates the water. But we're going to drink the water. We used it to boil it, to do bath, to wash clothes, because we don't have any, running hot water. So we had to use that in the winter to boil it and make it hot in order to wash our clothing.
Sure. So plenty clean for those uses.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But for drinking water, we used to go. There was a running fountain that it would run for spring water, and we will fill those jugs.
To include in the book.
We will fill those big jugs and carry them home. And because the jugs were like a terracotta, they would last a couple of days and they stay fresh. So that was our drinking water. That's how we survived.
You have a really nice knack for including interesting facts. You don't say, well, we got water from the well.
Yeah.
Well, but eels are, what the hell are the eels doing?
Yeah, they do. They work.
They're going to work for you.
They work. Yeah.
So you lived in, say the name again.
Partana.
Partana.
Partana, yes.
Partana. Yeah, until you were a girl.
Until I was 15.
15.
Yes. So
And then
right at 15, literally, I turned 15 in November, and January 1968, it was on a Sunday. We had a dinner, which was a lunchtime, and about 1:30, the earth shook. We had literally an earthquake, and we ran out of the house, and with my family and my sisters and my father and my kids and everybody, like the neighbors, everyone ran out. And
we have a picture that you provided, which is also
Yes,
in the book,
that's
of the
right.
area struck by the earthquake.
Correct, which is the map.
And our director Emily
Yeah.
will put that up while we
and
talk.
Partana is there, yes.
Yeah.
So we stayed out for a few hours, but literally, we didn't think of anything of it, like nothing is going to happen again. So everybody went back home. But by going back home, we went about doing our finishing day. And then at night, we went to bed, and about exactly 1:30 in the morning, we had another rumble, and it was a big, over 7 grade. I mean, 7.3, something
That's
like
about
that.
as big as they get.
It was big. So what happened was that my mom had, because the town doesn't get water, running water, we will fill up our bathtubs, our buckets, our pots and pans. So my mom had the bathtub filled up, and while we were sleeping, all of a sudden this water splashes everywhere, all over the floor, and we woke up to it that we had an earthquake. So now we're running out of the house, pulling all the blankets in our pajamas. We went down about, I would say, maybe 200 meters. We went down, there was an open field that we used to play at. And when we got there, everybody was running there because that's a more safe place. And as we got there, it was snow on the ground for the first time ever in Sicily. So we had about a foot of snow. But we had no choice. We could not go back. And so we just stood there. Everybody huddled each other. The guys, my father with the man, tried to do some fire, they broke some twigs, but everything was wet.
And this is January.
This is January 15, in the middle of the night. So nobody had electricity. So it was just the full moon, and it was shining into the white snow. That's how we got our light. And so now dawn came about, and we didn't know what to do, whether we had to go back, whether we not had to go back. So some people did go back to look at things, but you could not see, the earthquake was still shaking, so we could not go back. We had lots of tremors, throughout the day. And so I guess, we stayed in the fields. So what happened is my dad, with the guys, they had a big tarp that we used to put grapes in there when we do the vineyards. So they took a big, humongous tarp and they tied it around the trees. And about 45 of us, we were all under there. So they took hay and they put blankets on top of there, and that's where we slept for a whole week.
A week.
It was raining.
I want to mention to our audience,
Yeah.
the graphic which you just saw
Right.
is also in the book. There are many,
Correct.
many good informative pictures in the book. We're going to use a few of them
Yeah.
here on the show. This is the chart of the spread of the earthquake from its epicenter and to the
In
further,
Partana, yeah.
bigger area
Right.
of destruction.
So with that, we stayed there for a week, and about a week later, we started to see the Red Cross. We started to see the army coming in, the soldiers, and they went to this big field where they play soccer, and they built tents for us.
And there are pictures of the
and there are
tents in the
pictures of the
book.
tents. So we were assigned a tent for 3 families in each tent. And my mother had 3 girls, and there were another family that had 3 boys and another boy, and she was very protective of us. So she divides the tent with sheets, and we were able to sleep in a little corner on top of hay, of course.
Yeah.
And we were there for another 45 days.
I bet you can still feel cold when you remember that.
Oh, yeah. 45 days. I mean, in between, the Red Cross, they will feed us. They set up a big stations with kitchens, and medical tents were there. So everything was there, but we were there for 45 days. So we have long relatives in New York, in Manhattan, and they kind of heard the earthquake happening on television, the newspapers. So they were worried about us because but we'd never met them, except one of the relatives.
They were from the same town.
There wasn't. What happened is these people, they were third cousins of my mother. And in 1929, when my mother was born, one of them baptized my mother, and they literally came back to America, and that was it. So we never saw them again, except that year that they were there in 29, which my mother was a baby. So with that, never saw them. But they kept in touch through letters, through packages that we would get dresses from them and stuff like that. So when they heard about the earthquake, they really were concerned. And because my mother was 4 sisters and 2 brothers, they sent 4 tickets, 4 airplane tickets paid in a letter to my mother's older sisters that they lived in Gibellina, which that town completely flattened out. So my mother, by the time they got to my parents, it took a while, these tickets, because my aunt and uncles, they refused to take it because they had lots of, they have means of how to stay there. So in other words, if you leave, the government would not give you money to rebuild your home. So if you lost your home and you stay there, then the government will give you so much ahead, depends how many people are in the house,
but not
to
if you
rebuild.
abandon it.
And if you abandon and you go, you don't get anything.
Yeah.
So none of them wanted to take that opportunity. So those tickets got to my mom, and she goes, you know what? I got 3 girls. My baby sister was 4 years old. That was the oldest. She goes, I got 3 girls. I'm going to just take a chance and go. And that's it. So we went to the consulate in Palermo. We asked for visas, and they wouldn't give my father a visa because they didn't want the man to leave towns because they had to rebuild, they had to clean up. And they thought that if the men stay behind, then the wives will come back. So with that, my mother said, you know what, we're going to get out of here, and eventually you're going to come. So
I want to add, your little sister, Enza, is here with you
that's
today.
right.
To watch the show.
To watch the show.
Make sure you get everything right.
Oh, yeah, I know. That's what she's here for, right? So basically, we get on a plane, and we came to New York, and we got a Kennedy Airport. When we arrived, our family was all there, and they have, I'm sorry, they had name like a little tag with our name on it because we didn't know who they were, and they didn't know who we were, right? So, and once we met, they took us home, and we stayed with them for 6 months in their homes.
In New York City?
In New York, in Richmond Hill. So my aunt, she says, my mother says, I'll take Antoinette in a factory work with me because we had to make some money to get my father here. Instead, my aunt says, no, she's going to school. So she went.
Said, no, she's going to school.
No working.
Going to school.
Going to school.
Good
So
for her.
she signed me. We went to the Board of Education, me and my sister Enza, and she signed me up for at the high school, Richmond Hill High School. And my sister went to junior high school. So I didn't know no English whatsoever, nothing whatsoever. But I managed it for the end of the year. That was okay. But then, so what happened was that my head was in sewing and helping my mother making money. And because I didn't speak English, I just ignored it to really learn English. So
in the book you mentioned you liked math.
I
because
did
you
like
didn't have to
and
speak
stenography.
English.
Do you remember then there was
yes.
stenography?
Because you didn't have to
That
speak
I loved.
in English. Yeah.
I loved the stenography and I loved math. But in between that time, we had a family, we have a paisan from Partana, and his mom came to visit him, and he kind of said to my mother, can I bring my mother over and say hello to you? Because we knew her from my town. So to make a long story short, when she came, she saw me and she says, you know what? That girl has been working really hard all her life. She's a good match for your cousin Angelo, which is, it was a cousin of his.
And I know from your book that worked out.
And that worked out. Well, 53 years later, yes, it's still working out. So with that, I met my husband-to-be.
So this in 1968 was a huge
thing.
Dynamic change for you, explosion, literally explosion
literally.
from the earthquake.
That's
And
right.
then you do a complete different turn,
Yeah.
cross the Atlantic,
So-
wind up in New York City.
I met Angelo in 69, and we got married in January 70. Very quick, because our tourist visa was expiring in February.
So 2 years after the earthquake.
Correct.
Two
We
years
only
from
had-
January. Exactly.
Exactly.
Same
It was
month.
expiring as, yes. So we had to go back. So with that, because I met Angelo and he was a citizen, we decided to get married, but I was underage. So my mother had to come to the city hall with me and sign up that it was okay for me to get married. And so we got married and I became a citizen. And with that, I have my mother and my sisters, they all got the green card. So everything was settled except my father, which got left in Sicily. So now we're trying for him to come, but they still won't let him.
So what was the reason they wouldn't let the men out?
They still did not want the men out. They want the men to be there in order to rebuild.
To
To rebuild
the
Partana
damage.
and all the towns that got
'Cause there was,
demolished.
I don't know if you mentioned there's destruction all over Sicily.
Yes. Oh,
Not-
well, not the
it-
whole of Sicily, all over that area that it's mapped out.
It's mapped,
Totally,
okay.
yeah, totally flattened out. And
Yeah.
literally they rebuilt about, I think they're about finished now, 50 years later, believe it or not.
I
So,
want to mention that I mentioned the pictures already, but I want to make sure to emphasize that there are a lot of family pictures in the book that we're not going to be able to show graphically on air, but there are a lot of family pictures that bring you really into the presence that Antonietta is talking about, with the family, the individuals, her sisters, her aunt, and the neighborhoods in New York, and it's very, very, very well illustrated. So now we're in
So-
New York City,
so now we're in New York.
1970.
Yes.
You just got married.
Yes.
What do you do for a living?
So I was a seamstress. So because sewing.
Sewing.
I love to sew. So basically, I just sewed at home, raising 3 children. But then when the children got old enough, I was offered a position at a McCall's Pattern Company, which is it was like a freelance job. So a messenger would bring me material and all the equipment for me to sew, and I would put together the dresses and send it back to them, have them try on. And once they got finished, they were, McCall's, when you go to a fabric store, they have those big books of patterns.
I know that. I've
That
been
you-
with my wife.
Okay,
sometimes.
there you go. So what happens is my sewing was on the cover of those books. And I did the Dynasty collection, if you remember Dynasty, Joan Collins and
Yes.
Linda Evans and Brooke Shields and Sherry Belafonte. So
We're wearing
they're wearing my dresses,
handmade
correct.
dresses.
And they were on the cover of those books. So I did that for about 11 years. I also did sewing for an MTV commercial, which it ran for 6 months. And the idea of that was for to get young kids to learn how to sew and encourage them. And it showed through the Institution of Technology, which is in Manhattan,
Yeah.
that they do a lot of sewing. And the main thing was the Prince collection. So I did a purple coat like Prince, and I sewed 13 outfits from sportswear to evening wear with a wedding gown, and it ran for 6 months on MTV.
MTV, 6 months.
6 months.
So what year was this?
In
70, late 70s, early
in
80s?
about 84.
Oh, 84.
Yeah.
So do you still sew at all?
I do. So, but sewing now it's done, and now I am offering this job in a bridal store. And I've never worked in a bridal store, but why not? So I went, and I was sewing for about 6 months. And when my bosses saw me that I could sell, I could do other stuff in front of the store, he took me out of sewing, and he put me in front of the stores doing the selling, doing the fittings, doing the buyer. So I ended up going into Manhattan twice a year to buy mother of the bride, wedding gowns. I met designers, Demetrios, Skazi.
So you're in an executive position now.
Yes, totally in charge,
running
running the whole bridal business.
procedure.
Correct.
no hands-on anymore, no sewing anymore.
No, I hire my own seamstress. I hire my own sales girls part-time. Even my sister pitched in a few times.
Yeah.
So, and I did it all because I was able to sell a dress and show them how it looks, hint, with the bustle up, because I know how to do it.
And when you were hiring seamstresses, you knew who was
I
good
knew who's
and
good.
who wasn't.
Oh yeah. And you know,
When you first sewed, you were all hand sewing,
Correct.
not a machine right away.
No, a pedal machine. You know
Pedal
those old
machine.
pedal machines. That's what I had in Sicily. But when
Wait.
it got here, it was the electrical thing, and it was fun. So then it was good. So, and that's my sewing. But once, about 2009, my daughter had a baby.
How many children do you have?
I have 3 children.
And
I have 2 boys and a girl.
2 boys and a girl.
One is in Brooklyn, and another boy is in Thailand.
And the
Married,
daughter,
and my daughter is here in Gloucester.
Gloucester.
That's right. So my daughter was married 10 years before they decided to have a baby. So in 2009, my granddaughter Sienna was born. And we came here to just visit. It was January 27th. We are on the boulevard.
January, everything happens in January.
We are on the boulevard strolling her along, and my daughter goes, wouldn't it be nice if you guys retire and move up here so you could watch the baby and I go to work? And my husband goes, sure, it would be nice. I go fishing and mommy will watch the baby. So, well, with that, P.S., we found this apartment right on the boulevard. Literally that day, there was signs of Century 21 in our balcony. And she called the real estate agency, and we went in and looked at it. We loved it. Waited a few months because somebody else had an idea of getting it. You know, the real estate did not want to give it up yet. And then we got it. So literally April 1st, we did the closing, and during that month, we moved in.
So you've been here 14 years now.
So I've been here 14 years, watching Sienna. And then Mason was born, my other grandchild, and I was babysitting. But once they started school, then what was I doing? So one day I was literally on the balcony looking out, and I said, let me go for a walk. I saw Susan Kelly across the street from me, which is at the Pavilion Beach.
She is the one
She's
who
the Generous
founded Generous Garden.
Correct.
We have a picture of you as a generous gardener gardening. And we're going to show that.
Yeah.
We'll talk under it. We won't be able to see it here.
Okay.
But Emily will make sure it runs while we're talking about generous gardening. So you take care of especially that beautiful floral
at that time, that's
array
all, yes.
right in front of your house.
Correct. At that time when I met her.
Yeah.
But when I went up across the street and said to her, thank you so much for cleaning, because now I'm looking at this beautiful, garden. She goes, oh no, I'm not cleaning it because I'm cleaning. I'm a volunteer. I run a volunteer group that we clean the Women's Monument and little gardens around town. So I asked if I could join in. She goes, sure. I literally went back home, changed, and went back with her. And I've been with her since.
And that was 09?
That was 09.
So right after, you found something to do right away.
To do right away. So
okay, we have that picture of you gardening.
Yeah.
We're going to show that. There's also one other picture I want to show, because you've been involved in some of the festivals here.
Yeah.
Some of the religious festivals.
Correct.
Especially connected with not St. Peter, but St. Joseph.
Yeah. So
and we have a picture of a shrine that you helped create in honor of St. Joseph. We'll show that now.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about that, I want to know how you were involved.
How did I get involved?
In creating that. Yeah.
So Ann Johnson Girardi, she's also a volunteer of ours with Generous Gardeners. She asked me if I wanted to go to one of the novenas of Felicia Cimitaro, Joey's sister. So, and I went with her one night. We did the novena, and it's a nine-day novena, and then the last day you have the feast for St. Joseph. So I went the first year with her, and I kind of got myself into it. And as I'm there and talking to Felicia and talking to the other girls and explaining to them that when I was in Sicily, we would do the altar the same way that they do it here. And me and my mom would do the bread and display it on the altar. And it's like a little, goes around and around. Like we went back to where it was.
There's so many Sicilians here.
Correct.
They were ready to welcome you in your own
So when
tradition.
Felicia found out that I was doing bread, that I used to do it in Italy, she says, why don't you do it for the altar? So she gave me the dough, she gave me everything. I did some breads, and P.S. I made some spectacular breads for that also. So now I'm totally involved with that, 100%. I make the bread and I cook some, we make the pasta dough with them. I do everything with the girls.
When is St. Joseph's feast day?
March 19th.
March 19th.
Yes.
Mary's husband, by the way, for our viewers that might not remember that. My middle name is Joseph, so I think it's a good idea to celebrate him.
Oh, that would be nice.
We're almost at the end of our time. I want to talk about the book.
Yes.
I want to ask you again where our viewers can get it.
The bookstore on Main Street.
Yes.
That's one.
I want to show you.
The library, literally, they have one, and I could bring more if they want to, but I could do that. And then I'm going to put it on Amazon. And that's easy
Amazon
to get.
wants
Yes.
a big hunk of your money.
I know. That's why, see, at the beginning when I first did the book, it was just, let me give you a quick explanation why I did the book. That's another thing. So my son is a producer for advertising agency. And my husband...
He's the one who lives in Brooklyn.
Yes. And my husband is one of 8. And he was born in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in 1940, time of Mussolini. So my son got so interested in his story that because my father-in-law was prisoner of war in Kenya for 7 years, that he went to Africa and he studied all about the war, and when he came back, he interviewed all the brothers and sisters of my husband, and he says, that's a beautiful, interesting story. And I says to him, well, what about my story? And he goes, well, it's only you and my dear Enta. There is not much. I go, I'll show you. And that's why the book came.
I hope our viewers go buy this book. It's a wonderful book, and I mean that straightforwardly and honestly. It's a wonderful book. I found it very moving, and I hope you can get a hold of it. The purpose of the show is to talk about and meet Antonietta. It also amplifies the importance of the 400th anniversary here in Gloucester this year, because her story is the story of so many thousands and thousands of people who have come into Gloucester and fallen in love with it and built it and helped contribute to its history and heritage.
Yeah, and by the way, it's also on the 400 stories, the book.
Pardon?
It's also on the 400 stories.
This is on the 400
Correct.
stories. Good, thank you
Yes.
for reminding. This is on the 400 stories section of the Gloucester 400 website.
Yes.
Thank you for being on the show.
You're very
Antonia.
welcome.
I
It was a
enjoyed very much.
pleasure.
I enjoyed the book very much.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank our TV audience for being with us too. If you've learned something about Antonietta Calabrese's history and how she came from Sicily to the Boulevard in Gloucester, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to meet you again next time on the Writer's Block. Good night.